Hey there, gang. Patrick King here, and I want to thank you for tuning in for episode number 22 of Talking About Horses. In these broadcasts, I try to bring you some of the best riders, horsemen, trainers, equine advocates, and thought leaders in the horse industry for tips, insights, and stories. You can listen at home, at work, in the car, even in the saddle, through Facebook, YouTube, or by downloading or streaming through iTunes. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by returning guest Kendra Skorstad of Skorstad Farrier Service. Along with her husband, Sean, Kendra works with a diversified clientele seeking to maximize potential through individualized hoof care, merging traditional farriery and innovative solutions to provide the premium in hoof care. Kendra, once again, thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me again.
All right, awesome. So for anybody out there who didn't catch our last broadcast, do you want to give us a little bit more of a background on yourself and the business you and Sean have?
Oh, sure. So I guess I kind of grew up around horses. I got my first horse when I was 13. It has been a lifelong passion for me. I basically can't stop learning enough about it. I'm a geek. My husband makes fun of me all the time. He's like, "You just never stop learning, do you?"
Perfect.
No, don't. So it's carried over into my business as well, and I'm the same way. And so I'm like a sponge. I love learning. I love getting to know all aspects of the horse and the hoof and the relationship between the two. And I spend countless hours every year for continuing education and working with my peers and learning what I can to bring forth the best I possibly can for all my clients, no matter whether they're maintained barefoot or they're trail horses or they're performance horses. I try to be as well-rounded of a farrier as possible. And so I've been a farrier for 14 years, and I got to the point where I was busy enough that I needed to hire help, and my husband was in a place in his life that he thought that, well, by golly, let's go do this. So we've been together, working together now for almost 3 years, and we're just having a blast.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Perfect. What made you decide you wanted to become a farrier?
Fear of vet school.
Fair enough.
I wanted to work with horses, and I wanted to feel like I was making a difference, and I wanted to help do something productive in the world. And the idea of going to an institution like a university and sitting in a classroom for the next 8+ years of my life was a terrifying prospect. It just wasn't for me. I am a hands-on, go out there, get dirty kind of learner, and sitting in a classroom it just wasn't for me.
Gotcha. Well, that's fair enough. And you are certainly making quite a difference in the world where you are and with the clients you're working with. So that's fantastic to see. That's awesome. So we want to talk a little bit today about winter transitions for our horses' feet. I know where I am, the cold has been hitting. I feel like a little bit of a princess. I was in Florida 2 weeks ago, enjoying the sunshine, and now I'm covered under a few inches of snow up in New York. So I don't adjust well to the winter and to the cold. Like I said, I'm kind of a princess. But so now's the perfect time. I know in a lot of places around the country, late fall's here, winter is setting in. What are some of the things that you think about as far as preparing our horses' feet for the winter?
So I think the biggest thing is I want to determine from clients if the horses are going to stay in shoes or if they're going to come out of shoes. For me, if they're going to stay in shoes, we need to consider, and this is a little bit dependent upon location and the kind of weather that you get, but for us here in southern Wisconsin, gosh, we'll have everything from ice to feet of snow in 1 year. So we kind of have to approach it for every aspect. So if they're going to stay in shoes, the things we need to think about is some sort of traction for them. Horses slipping on ice is awful, and it's not something to mess around with. And so there's different types of traction that we can add to shoes that are varied aggressiveness. We can just do little drive-in tungsten pins that work great, all the way up to something like boreum. for someone who's going to be out on more icy terrain more than the average horse. So traction is important. Snow pads. There's different types of snow pads on the market. There's a full pad that's usually black. It's got a bubble right in the middle of it. So some people are familiar with that. There's another one. It's a little bit more like a rim pad. It has like this like tubing that goes around the inside of the shoe, and it flexes when the horse walks a little bit, so it keeps ice from balling up in the bottom of the feet. That ice balling up in the bottom of the feet lends itself to more slipping issues and potential soft tissue injuries as well. So keeping snow from balling up in the feet and making sure we have good traction for horses that stay shod is super important.
So what about the work that they do? Is that going to be a determinant also of what you would recommend for your clients' horses? And I would assume then the terrain that they're going to be doing that work on is going to be important as well. Sure.
So most people that are going to continue working have access to an indoor ring. So if we're going to be pulling shoes, so that was the other part of this, if we're going to be pulling shoes, I try to be really mindful, and I actually start having this conversation with people back in October, because if we wait until the ground is frozen hard, I feel like we're just setting horses up for failure. Like the ground is rutted at this point because we've had moisture and it froze unevenly. And then we're going to pull the shoes, and now the horses have to navigate now not having shoes for the first time in who knows how long, and a very unforgiving terrain. So
gotcha. So that's not enough time for the feet to get accustomed yet.
No. So I had this conversation back in October, and I know that sounds really early, but we can start seeing frozen ground, middle of November sometimes. We might not have any snow or ice, but the ground can start to freeze. And so I want to start thinking about pulling shoes while the ground is still soft, giving them a chance to first acclimate to not having the shoes on a terrain that is a little bit more forgiving than something that's frozen, and giving them a chance to get comfortable, and then as the ground freezes, they can hopefully adapt with that. So the considerations that I take into account when we're pulling shoes off is how much foot I leave for these horses, and whether or not they can tolerate it. Some horses just have a foot conformation or a type of foot that just isn't as comfortable. So, that those are things that we need to think about. And so to transition some horses, depending on the situation, for how much work they're going to be doing, and where it's going to be at, I feel like transitioning maybe straight to barefoot might work, transitioning with a composite shoe. So if we do this in October, I could get a couple of cycles in where I'm using some sort of a synthetic shoe that is flexible. And so what that does is still protects the foot on a more semi-permanent basis, meaning we're not taking a boot on and off. Okay. And we can allow the foot to have more function in it and start to get used to that. It's kind of like when you pull shoes off, kind of like if you've broken a bone and you've been in a cast and the bone is healed and everything feels okay, but your soft tissue is atrophied. It's not ready to support you because you've had something else doing the support for you. And I think of shoes a little bit that way. And so it takes time for that soft tissue to strengthen up and be more capable of supporting the horse. So doing it with a synthetic shoe can help ease that transition. I usually find that I can get a cycle or two with that. That also really helps some of these horses transition smoothly. And again, some horses do okay as far as riding is concerned, but they just need help in turnout, so maybe boots are an option. If that's not an option, I feel products like Hoof Armor or Vet Techniques, a product called Soul Guard. They're not applications for every single horse out there, but for the right horses, there are certainly great products that are available to help horses transition. Okay.
Let's see. So what about some of our, dare I say, our specialized horses that maybe are dressage horses, our jumpers, our reiners, that sort of thing? for turnout. So let's take the reiners, for example, with their sliding plates. What kind of recommendations might you have for a horse like that, where they run a risk of slipping on normal terrain, let alone frozen and icy, snowy terrain?
Right. And I'll be honest, I actually don't shoe a single reiner. I've done a couple over the years in my time, but I don't shoe enough. I don't shoe any to be able to give you an honest answer for what would be helpful. What comes to mind for those horses, or for some of your dressage horses too, we can drill and tap the shoes, and then you can take and screw in a stud for turnout. They make smaller ice studs that aren't studs like they have for jumpers or eventers, but there's a smaller, shorter stud that is removable, so you could still you can take those out, and then when they need to go to work, they can still do their work. Gotcha.
Okay. Okay. And when you do that, do those, I would assume those would have a tendency to pack up with arena dirt and things like that. So I guess they're fairly easy to clean those out then?
Yeah, the stud holes can clean out. You can get little stud cleaning kits, and they come with a little wire brush, and then you can get either cotton or a little rubber stopper that can go in there. You get it really clean, and then so you've removed your stud, you've cleaned it, and then you can put the little stopper in there, or the cotton in there to help it clean as well.
Okay. 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 So when you're looking then at the horse that you're considering pulling the shoes on, what are some of the factors that you look into? How do you decide if the horse then can handle them? You said you start having these conversations back in October. How do you draw that line?
So I start by seeing what his workload is. Is he going to get time off? Are they going to back off on training and just let him kind of just, relax through the winter, and maybe, whatever he's doing, he's just going to do some walk, trot, canter, just gymnastics, easy stuff, no major work. Maybe we can consider pulling shoes for that. If we have a horse that's going to stay in a full workload, or a horse that has injuries or compensations or arthritis that we need to support him for, then I think staying in shoes is probably the best for them. We have some horses that they went into shoes because of foot sensitivity issues or hoof quality issues, and pulling the shoes for a few months, it's a little bit of a gamble. Will they or won't they fall apart? But if you have somebody who wants to continue working their horse through the winter, keeping the shoes on to maintain their comfort level and usability is probably the best idea. So I look a little bit at, are we using the shoes to help support the horse so he can do his job? Are they going to continue working? And can they stay comfortable without shoes? So the things that I look at, sorry, I'm having to gather my thoughts. The things that I look at to help me understand if a horse can tolerate going barefoot or not, or are things that I physically can see. So do I have good bony alignment in the distal limb? Do my bones have a broken forward or broken back axis? Do I have good heel height, toe length? Do I have good quality of tissue in the hoof wall, the sole, the frog, the digital cushion? If any of those things aren't quite right, I would be having a very serious conversation about, the long-term comfort of the horse. Because for me, if we can't take a horse barefoot and he can't stay comfortable, it's a problem. Not just from a performance-related standpoint, but pain in general causes compensation patterns and restriction. Sure. And it's not good. Nobody likes to live in pain, and it has far-reaching stresses on our body than we even begin to know about. So, having them be painful all winter long, but because he's sitting in turnout and not working, still doesn't fly for me. Whether he works or not, pain shouldn't be present if we can avoid it.
Right. Now, and I've seen in the past some people that will pull a horse's shoes, and the horse will kind of struggle a little bit or a lot, depending on the horse. And then we've got owners that'll say, or farriers will say, I'll just let him toughen up, and the horse will struggle along for potentially months at a time. I've always personally had a problem with that because it just feels downright abusive to me to let a horse be in a state of discomfort enough to the point that he's limping around on the ground that he needs to exist on a daily basis. What kind of a time limit is there for the discomfort? Is there a way to say, okay, well, maybe he'll be sore for a couple days, or you know, when is there the cutoff there that you say, look, he's just not going to be able to handle it?
For me, the cutoff is 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops.
Okay.
So sometimes they do just need a little bit of supportive care, meaning we just baby them a little bit. We keep them off the hard ground, but, you know, maybe just on pavement where it's at least a flat surface, so it's not rutted like the frozen ground. Maybe we discussed with our veterinarians the use of some anti-inflammatories to make the process a little bit easier, because sometimes we just have to get over the pain hump and they'll be fine on the other end of it. But if it goes past 3 weeks, that is concerning, and then I'm going to want to put shoes back on that horse unless the clients are willing to boot or manage the environment differently so the horse isn't uncomfortable. And to me, lameness isn't just head bobbing lame. It is reluctance to go from a soft surface to a hard surface. It is a shortened stride. It's stiffness. It's biting. It's kicking. It's a whole myriad of symptoms that aren't just limited to head bobbing lameness. Right.
I know I've seen plenty of horses in the past that'll still go, but they kind of look like they're walking on eggshells.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So for me, 3 weeks is tops. I feel like 2 weeks is more closer to the point of where I'd like to be it. But if they're not, and I guess that's the thing, if they're just as lame as day one as they are at day 14, we need to very seriously reassess. If they're improving from day 1 to day 14, but it's a little slow going, but they're still improving, well, then I'm happy with that. I had a guy here recently. They pulled the shoes. The feet were having an issue. We were coming into winter. They decided to pull the shoes. The horse became very painful. And where the guy felt like he could ride, the horse was now all of a sudden getting picked on in turnout, and he wasn't getting over to the food because his feet hurt and he couldn't stand up for himself in turnout. And so for that particular situation, putting shoes back on that horse not only helped the guy feel more confident. The guy could ride him on soft ground. He just couldn't ride him on hard ground, and the horse would pick his way over to soft surfaces. He was a trail rider. He'd pick his way over soft surfaces all the time, and the guy felt like he was okay there. But since putting shoes back on, the horse now isn't having trouble standing up for himself because he can move efficiently and comfortably, and he's much happier that way. So I want to see these horses improving, not just staying lame.
Right. Well, and that takes a certain level of awareness then also on the part of that owner. Like you said, he was noticing that in the turnout, the horse was kind of getting picked on and wasn't able to get to the feed. So potentially taking off the shoes, if he wouldn't have been on top of that, then we could have been talking about potentially considerable weight loss issue at one of the hardest times of the year for weight loss. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's not every horse's case, but, you know, it certainly was in this case, and, you know, I could see it potentially happening for other horses.
Right. Okay, so we've got a couple messages that are popping in from the viewers on the live feed here on Facebook. One of them I think is really great, asking about a horse that has white hooves, and is it a fallacy or is there truth to the fact that white hooves might be softer?
I haven't found that to be the case. I have plenty of horses that have white feet that are just as solid and good as any other hoof out there. I feel like we see more defects, so to speak, cracks and whatnot, because they're just, the contrast of the dirt packing and the crack to the rest of the foot is so much more obvious than.
Gotcha. So it's a visual perspective.
I think so. I think so. There's certainly horses that are white hoofed that have softer feet, yes, but there are just as many horses with black feet that have the same issue, or striped feet for that matter. So I haven't found that to be, anything that I've been concerned about. I heard one individual explain it to me that because of the color, the way that it absorbs light and heat might affect it, but I haven't noticed that. I haven't noticed anything major as far as what I see. Are there maybe other things we could look at, other indication and other markers? Sure, I just don't know what those would be without getting into like the microscopic aspect of it, and that's looking at cadavers. So I'm not sure, but I don't feel like there's any major difference. And when they've done dissections, they're not noticing any differences in, at least to my knowledge, there could be, but at least not to my knowledge, there's no differentiation between the laminae and how many there are, how tight they are. There's no differences between white feet and black feet.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's definitely not going to be then any kind of a deciding factor when you're pulling shoes. That's just going to be down to the individual basis of the quality of that horse's feet.
It's individual, and I would also say too that I don't think it's breed specific, but I think it's very individual. There are some horses that are out there that are just, they're literally and figuratively thin-skinned animals. They're very sensitive to everything. And those horses, I'm way more careful about taking barefoot, just because they tend to kind of be pansies. And I don't blame them, but
no, they're just more sensitive. Sure.
Way more sensitive. And you put a little stone under their foot, and they'll pretty much make you think that their foot might fall off.
I'm the same way.
And I have that in quarter horses, and I have it in warm bloods, and I've got some thoroughbreds with some of the toughest darn feet out there. So it's not breed specific. It really is an individual thing. Okay,
great. So when we take our shoes off, when we decide to do that, what sort of issues then are we looking for that tell us, aside from then the 14 days, like you said, are there any other issues that we look at to say we've got a challenge with our feet there that we need to address differently?
In terms of just speaking about for the feet or overall?
Well, I guess for overall, sure.
I think one of the things that plays a really big factor is helping owners understand that and I'm assuming that the feet look good when they're in shoes. Some feet do not, but assuming that they do, people are used to seeing the feet look good. And oftentimes when you pull them out of shoes, where the nail holes have been, in the quarters especially, the feet will chip up. And most times it's cosmetic. Sometimes it'll take the horse's medial-lateral balance out of balance. And sometimes they can actually chip themselves up to detriment. Now, the number of times that I've actually seen that happen are like 2 or 3 times. It's very rare that I have a hoof chip up in the quarters alone to a point of having a major problem that we need to get a shoe back on. So I think understanding that aesthetically, things might change. The shoe has been holding that foot in a certain shape for a long time, and taking it out, the foot now can wear a little more naturally. It can wear. The shoe protects it from doing that. So we might see, the toe bricks over this way or that way. They did it in shoes, you just didn't see it because we protected the foot. So I think being aware of the aesthetic changes for sure, being aware of the potential for bruising, especially bruising and then abscessing, especially on hard ground, and then ground when it's changing from soft to hard. I mean, it's freezing here, and by Monday it'll be back in the 40s, and so we're going to go through a change again where we're going to go back to some soft ground but our feet have been rock hard, and then they're going to soften up, and then the ground's going to freeze again. And so we're getting a lot of fluctuations in a short amount of time in our terrain, and the feet can't always keep up. And so they can get a little bit tender-footed.
Okay. So you mentioned chipping potentially becoming a problem if the feet chip enough. What do we define as enough? Or too much?
That is different for every horse and what they can tolerate. If their comfort level is maintaining, I don't get as concerned. Now, have I had some avulsions where they've chipped up and they're bleeding? Well, that's a phone call for your vet and me to come out for sure.
Okay.
Again, that happens so rarely, and that typically happens when we've had some sort of trauma to the foot. They've got it hung up in something, or they kicked something, or excessive length, and the wall just couldn't take it anymore, and they hit something just right on the ground, and it broke it off. But that's not super typical. So most times they only break off what is in excess. And now when we have shoes on, we have to have wall to nail to, and we're also in some cases tweaking the balance on feet. So we have to leave a little length here or a little length there. And then that wall doesn't have good connection to the white line and to the sole. And so it's a little bit freestanding, if you will. And that's more what's prone to chipping and breaking up. But typically it doesn't break up past the sole level.
Okay.
And if it does, it's usually superficially, but not always. And my caveat is always, it depends. Every horse is different.
Sure, absolutely. So when we get one that chips beyond that wall portion that you'd be nailing to, what are we looking at as a solution then if it's broken to that point or chipped to that point, and now the horse is lame or tender on that foot? Now what? What do we do? Is that the glue-on shoes? Is that a boot? Where do we go from there?
Either. And I'm hopeful that at least all of my clients, and hopefully anybody listening, is that if they start to see chipping and they're really not sure, just shoot a picture over to your farrier and say, do I need to be concerned? Start with a conversation. I hope it never even gets to the point of severity and I didn't know. Anytime I walk in and somebody says, well, I didn't know if I should tell you or not. It's like, always err on the side of telling me so we can make decisions sooner before it's an issue. So communication is key. And yes, some sort of glue-on shoe. There are, even when feet get really short, there are rarely instances we can't get a nail in a foot, but sometimes they're now uncomfortable because their feet are so short and nailing isn't going to feel good. So gluing on a shoe is probably the next best option. Or booting, if we don't want to glue, but we just need to give the foot some time, and the owners are willing and compliant, and we have an environment that's conducive for all of this, then I would say booting is definitely an option.
Okay. And you mentioned sending a picture over to your farrier, and that's something where I feel like as far as care like that goes with our horses, we're in such a fantastic time that we have these smartphones now. We have the iPhones and all this other stuff that you can easily, just like you said, send a picture over and get an answer pretty quickly, whereas in times past, before we had this technology, you had to call and pester. And I know there were, plenty of times when I may have called a farrier for something that was a non-issue, but out of paranoia, so that's a great idea. And surely for anybody out there listening, it's probably less of a pain for a farrier to take a look at a picture on their phone rather than it is to drive out to the farm just to find out that it's nothing.
Right. And what I feel is an emergency is not what the next person feels an emergency is. So having some clarity up front is really helpful, especially if it actually is an emergency or we really do need to take action, but it isn't an emergency. I can help walk the owners through different steps they can take to start making the situation better in preparation for me getting there. So for example, let's just say the foot's broken up. It's really bad. The horse is really sore. He's really uncomfortable, and I have got to get shoes back on it. and nailing isn't going to be an option, and now I have to glue. And he's uncomfortable, so he doesn't want to stand, rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
This is where anti-inflammatories are going to help reduce the pain. And again, making sure that we're good to give your vet, good to give with a vet's advice, dosage, and the right kind. And then, if the horse is in turnout, bringing him in so that his feet can dry, because gluing shoes on is a lengthy, very detailed, meticulous process. And having the feet dry is just one aspect of that. So, I can help walk them through it. Most people, when they understand what's going to happen and what we can do to make it better, they want their horses to feel better.
Right.
So if I help them take action and move forward with things that they can feel proactive with to help their horses feel better, things just go way better. But when I show up and the owner has been panicked for a week and they didn't know, that it doesn't help. Now we've lost time in trying to get this horse better when we could have been doing something proactive sooner.
Gotcha. So the communication is just a huge piece of that, which of course, right? And that's an issue, or that's something to have working for us with everybody on our team, of professionals with our horses. So do you have basic ground rules for that communication whenever you're talking to your clients? If you take on a new client, how do you express to them the importance of the communication, and what kind of rules do you set that way?
Oh, I'm so lax. Most of my clients come to me because they're referrals, and my referrals are always from really phenomenal clients who really understand that I take a great active interest in your horse, and I really want to communicate. I want to know how he is under saddle, and what we can do different, and I want to know where is he living and what is he eating, and how can I help his feet be the best that they can be. I don't know everything, but I know a lot about a lot of things, and I might be able to share some ideas with you. And so usually I get clients coming to me because I am quite open-minded, and most people tell me I'm easy to talk to, and so I think it kind of speaks for itself. And I ask a lot of questions. I ask a ton of questions, and people are always like, "Whoa, oh my gosh, my trainers never asked me that before." And it's like, oh, well, times are changing. This is how we're doing this.
Right, sure.
Yeah. So I think questions are a great way to work things out, and then people get a feel for who I am and what I want to know. And for me, I always want to know more than less. So as far as anything else, I don't know. Try not to text me at midnight, because I'm not going to get it until the next morning, and I can't help you at midnight anyways.
Right.
And if it's an actual emergency, call your vet, not me at midnight. But otherwise, I try to be as transparent and be as open door policy as people as possible, so that they feel like they can ask me anything that they need to ask me that would relate to their horse's hoof care.
Perfect. And I know that's something that I've kind of a way that I've always said it to my students in the past is you can get in touch with me anytime you want, so long as I can get back to you anytime I can.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. And I do my best. It's hard with social media these days. People, and myself included, end up feeling like we need an immediate response. And I do my best to get to people as soon as possible. But, most days I'm working and I'm under horses, and I don't have my phone on me when I'm working. I know a lot of guys that do, and it's great that they can multitask, and I'll be the first person to tell you that I can't, even though I'd like to try. I cannot multitask. And so I don't have my phone on me when I'm under horses, and if I can't get back to you right away, it's because I'm helping somebody else's horse.
Right, sure. Which is perfectly realistic, because if you were under my horse, helping my horse, I wouldn't want you to be getting back to somebody else at the same time.
Right. So.
All right, fantastic.
Things come up, but I don't usually do it when I'm in the middle of working on a horse.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so talking about the communication with the farrier, and we talked about potential issues when we transition over to barefoot. What kind of issues might we see if we've got problems potentially with the way a horse's feet are being done, and how do we communicate that? I know and I'm certainly no farrier, but I've done quite a bit of studying, and I see some clients' horses occasionally at clinics that the feet just look like they're not being treated or cared for the way they need to be for the proper movement of the horse. And there's definitely this stigma that if you want to start an argument, try to tell a farrier how to do their job. So, and I know that's not the case with everybody, but where do we step in? How do we decide to step in and have a conversation? And then how do we have that conversation?
That's such a fun question. A couple things. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you're the horse owner or the professional. One, it isn't personal. It's hardly ever personal, and we have to reserve judgment. So this goes, I think, for everybody, especially, like what you're saying, when you walk in and you see a set of feet that they just, wow, oof, those aren't looking so hot.
Right.
Well, one, you don't know when the horse was done unless you start asking questions. And you don't know what that farrier started with, and you don't know what's going on with that horse and why his feet look like that. I've had some horses where the feet were super, and then they had some sort of crisis, right? They colicked, and then they had some sort of septic inflammation afterwards. Or not septic, but they got sepsis. And so the feet fall apart. Or we have metabolic horses who became uncontrolled and they became super inflamed. So you just don't know the history to be able to say good or bad. Starting by asking questions to understand more will help you know, oh, okay, well, this horse is well overdue. Or, oh, he had some sort of health crisis 5 months ago, and I'm just seeing the end results of things growing out. Oh, okay. Sometimes things just take time to get better, and function comes, for me, before pretty. So I certainly have ugly feet in my practice that nobody sees, and I always tell my clients, don't show anybody these. But they function, and that is more where I want to make sure that my horses are okay, is that they're functioning well within the deformity or the distortion that they have. And as long as I'm making progress, and I document a lot of my work, I take photos and videos so that I can say, yes, we're making progress and I have an end goal, or we've made progress and now we've plateaued and now we need to adjust, or well, we're just not making progress and we need to switch plans completely. So coming into any situation, I always reserve judgment. I don't know what that last guy had to work with. I don't know if the horse was well behaved. I don't know the feet and how they looked before he did them. Maybe that horse had a lameness issue and was compensating for the last 6 weeks, and it made him grow really out of balance. So I think there's a lot of factors. I just had a horse. This was great. He's barefoot, and she told me that he was having trouble. I think it was in his transitions. He just was like not quite happy, and I was like, well, darn, he's been doing really good. I don't know what this is about. And like the day after I was there, he spit out a chunk of his tooth. Like he had a fractured tooth.
Oh, so wow.
Sometimes it isn't foot related. So we have to keep that in mind. We just don't know everything all the time. And we have to ask questions, be willing to investigate all of it.
Well, that makes perfect sense. That's good. So you were talking about the ugly feet. And about the function being more of a priority than pretty. when you've got ugly feet but they're functioning properly, is that something, you kind of piqued my interest with that? Is that you mentioned a bone alignment issue? Is what would cause a foot to be ugly and functional?
We'll take my horse for example. She just likes to flare. Her feet just get flared and super round looking, and I don't like it. Nobody likes flare. It's leverage. It's not great, but I can't. She has other underlying issues that it is just part of who she is, and we manage it as best we can. And so functionally, we make it work. So for her, she needs shoes. I can't maintain her because of the flaring and because of the other issues she has. I can't help her enough barefoot, not even barefoot with boots. Composite shoes, sure, but the flaring makes fitting some composite shoes difficult. So other horses that might have issues, I've had some horses that get ring bone, and they'll distort their foot because of the pressure at the top of the hoof wall, or because of the way they load their limb because of discomfort. We can't change that. The hoof wall is responding to internal variables that I can't affect, but I can affect how he moves and how he loads to some extent, and try to make it easier for him or more comfortable for him. Horses, for me, ugly, I guess it's always in the eye of the beholder. If the foot is functioning well and the horse is sound and he's able to live his life well, and I'm reducing as much of the tensions, or I'm not contributing to any issues, and I'm hopefully just staying out of his way or helping him. I don't mind. I have horses that are high-low, so they've got a more upright foot or a low foot, and where it doesn't look pretty because they don't match, I can shoe each foot as an individual for that limb and help that limb move to the best of its ability, and trying to get the limbs to move as evenly as possible, especially in dressage horses. Trying to keep them moving as evenly as possible. So it depends on the horse and the conformation and the posture that they have and the feet that they have. I've got some horses with some hind end conformational faults that causes their feet to flare pretty significantly, and so we modify that as much as we can with the trim, and then we help it even further with our shoeing as far as where the shoe is placed, or where we're grinding in the shoe, or the type of shoe, to help manage that, be as functional as possible for them. That is the question.
Okay. No, that sounds good. So one of the things that I guess I would think about when I think about ugly looking feet, and I don't see it often, but I guess I see it often enough to notice, when every foot looks like it's been trimmed or shod by a different farrier, where they're all different lengths and different angles and different, heel heights and things like that. What do we do when we have something like that? I know you said that to you there's no ego in it, there's nothing personal there, but how do we have a conversation about something like that?
That's a fun one.
Because I can't imagine there are very many horses out there, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm imagining there aren't very many horses where every leg is a different length and every foot should look totally different.
I have a handful of horses that I do, and they don't have a single matching pair.
Okay.
Every single leg is different.
Okay.
So first off, people are right or left-handed, and if we're lucky, we're ambidextrous. But when we're on the right side of the horse, we use our limbs a certain way. When we're on the left side of the horse, the front of the horse, the back of the horse, we use our limbs a certain way. So checking ourselves in our own work to make sure that our handedness isn't affecting our work is really important. And having that conversation is difficult. I couldn't imagine anybody coming up to me and saying, "You're right-handed. Have you thought about the fact that your right feet look different than your left feet?" I would probably be fairly mortified, because I'd be like, "Oh, did I miss something? What have I been doing wrong?" You know, but it can definitely be a factor. But there really are some horses that are really working hard to overcome compensation issue on top of compensation issue on top of compensation issues, and their feet just are just all different. If it's significant enough where we're seeing it more frequently, I would definitely be curious as to what's going on. Are we seeing a pattern of a certain type of training or certain riders? There's definitely certain people that elicit certain things in horses, and you see it across all the horses, which is really fascinating.
So things like crooked riders, or riders that are even in their seat compensating more on one side or another, is that something you're seeing as being an effect?
Absolutely. Especially if you have a single rider riding a lot of horses and you're seeing the same pattern in all of the horses. We can't help it. We're crooked. Nobody's perfect. No person or animal is. We're all crooked. So we just have to learn how to work within our crookedness and get as straight as possible to use ourselves as effectively as possible. So definitely riders can impact this. And I'm not saying we shouldn't ride. We just need to be aware of it. And as far as the feet are concerned, and getting to the bottom of it, x-rays and your veterinarian are invaluable, absolutely invaluable. If we're really concerned about the length of the toes all being different, then I think we definitely need to take x-rays and get some hard data to help us understand, oh, do we really just have different conformational limbs they just look different, and we can't fix that. So, for example, a horse up front who is high-low, there's different reasons for them to be that way. And a lot of times it can come from the hind end. And so what you'll end up seeing is diagonal pairs. So your upright front foot will have an opposite hind leg that also tends to be a little bit more upright. And then the same for the other front. If it's a lower foot, the opposite hind foot will be a little bit lower. Typically, it is not as noticeable as it is on the front end, but I start to ask questions when it is that noticeable. And then, do we need to be shoeing these horses differently to be compensating for these discrepancies? And that's a fantastic rabbit hole of shoeing and understanding the body and anatomy on how we would go about assessing all of these and trying to get all the feet to match more evenly, because quite frankly, if they're more matched, then the horses are more balanced.
Sure. So now, sorry, we're talking about a lot of things that, hopefully owners will be aware of, or hopefully owners will understand, but in the end, the owners are certainly not farriers. So aside from going to farrier school, what as an owner can and should we be doing for our education, so that we can have these intelligent conversations with the farrier and with the vet?
So I think that
you weren't prepared for that one, were you? I just pulled that one right out.
It's a really great question, because I get this all the time with new clients. I ask them how the horses are going. Oh, they're going great. Super. Transitions are good. You're good within your gaits. He's picking up his leads. Oh, yeah, everything's just fine. No problem. We only know what we know.
Sure, right.
And we do the best we can within that. And I'll go in and I'll make some simple shoeing changes. To me, they're simple anyways. There's nothing majorly wrong. It's just they needed a new farrier. They didn't call me in because they were having a problem. And I make the changes and I shoe my horses, and then they're like, oh my gosh, did you know? Since you did my horse, this is dramatically better. My horse is getting this lead now. And I said, wait a second, you told me the other day he was fine.
Yeah.
Having issues. So being able to sit back and objectively criticize ourselves as riders, as human beings within the profession and skill set with what we're doing, is there room for improvement? Can it get better? And I feel like that's a rabbit hole of a question, is can it get better? Because then, I guess I don't know. It's a rabbit hole of a question. And so and it's one that I like, and it fuels me because I always want to just get better and know more. But having those conversations with the farrier and us, and sometimes we just have to keep prompting to ask questions. How are these coming along? How is this doing? Is he getting this now? Is he still having trouble here? What are you finding? You know, and hopefully people start to catch on and have those conversations back with us. It's a super complicated topic, and I think that it's a fun one. And ask me the question again, because I feel like if you ask me again, I'm going to have more information all of a sudden.
Ask you now or ask you at another time?
No, now. Ask now.
Now. Ask you now. What can and should owners be doing to increase their education so they can have better conversations with their farrier and their vet?
I knew I'd get more information. So a lot of times universities have some sort of educational seminars once or twice a year where they have a team of vets and farriers and specialists that get together and they put on clinics for the public. Attending those is really good.
Okay.
I love researching online, with the caveat being, don't go into blogs, don't go into forums for your information, because what somebody's horse's symptoms look like are not necessarily just like your horse.
Right.
Your horse is not their horse, and it's not typically helpful information. Go to your professional's websites, you know, talk to your farrier about where can I learn more, and, you know, and it might be specific. I want to learn more about how the feet are impacting my piaffe passage transitions. I want to know more about how the feet are impacting my horse's ability to get over a fence. And I help direct you to articles and research by people that are professionals. And I think that those are invaluable resources. So definitely doing that. And most times, vets and farriers alike love having conversations. Now, we don't always have time, which is hard,
right?
But I think most vets are really open to having a conversation. You know, I call my vets that I work with all the time. Well, maybe not all the time, but I call them when I have questions. Gosh, I don't understand how this works. How is it that the feet are doing this to the body? Can you help me understand the physiology of it? Like, tell me more about what's happening with the bones, the tendons, and the ligaments, and the muscles, and where things are, you know, how they're all interacting, and help me really piece this together more. And so I think as owners and people that care for their horses, doing that sort of research is really helpful. And there's a lot of great books out there as well. So those would be my resources. Good,
that's awesome. And ask, right? I know I've always been very lucky. Whenever I had my training operation, now I'm on the road full time, but whenever I had my full-time training operation, the farrier was out every other Wednesday, if not every Wednesday, just because we had so many horses in the barn. And I used to joke to clients that those were the days when I didn't get anything else done, because I would spend the day on the floor drawing on horses' feet and then drawing on the body, and we would chat about the changes and what he was looking for and things like that. And it was such a fantastic education to be able to, as the trainer, right, as the guy riding all these horses, to be able to say, okay, this horse goes like this, and let's compare that to those feet, and this horse goes like this, and let's compare that to those feet. And then talk to the dentist, and then talk, you know, to the body workers and things like that, and pull a lot of that information together. It's priceless to be able to do that and to feel comfortable asking those questions. I know there's a lot of people out there that are not as comfortable asking questions. They feel dumb, they feel shy, they feel intrusive, they feel like it's not even their place to ask questions. So that's something that I'm constantly encouraging, and I'm really glad to hear you offer that same information, to just get out there and ask the questions.
Absolutely ask the questions, and also know that there are some people that don't want to give the answers or can't. And then you have to decide whether or not you want to keep working with them. And it's nothing against anybody. We're all different. We all have different personalities, and we all go through the world differently. We have the people like me that love information. And then there's people who just want to get the job done. And there's nothing wrong with either personality, but they might not be the right fit for you. And so understanding that as well. You know, I've got clients that stick with me because, man, they ask 101 flipping questions every time I'm there. And I answer them as best I can.
Right.
And they're great. I love those clients. They always are like, oh, sorry, I asked so many questions. It's like, no. Ask more questions, because the more you ask, the more I learn too. So.
Yeah, and look at this. I was able to ask the same question twice and get a better answer each time.
See?
I feel like, is there a limit? Can I ask a third time? No, I'm kidding. Oh, gosh. So more into that, I understand you've got some tips for us for having conversations like this with our farrier. Is that right?
I've kind of tried to sum it up as best I can, yes.
Okay. Let's hear about that.
When you're having a conversation with a professional, my first and foremost is pick your timing. When they're trying to nail a shoe on, might not be a good time to ask a really complicated question.
Gotcha, yeah.
At least not with me. Oh my gosh. I always tell people, you have to wait. I'm nailing. This is important. Just please give me 2 minutes here. It's all important. But, you know, when you have sharp, pointy objects and you're swinging a hammer, I prefer to not be distracted.
Right. I had a farrier years ago that it was a very good friend of mine, and he used to say, you can only ask me questions when my head is above my butt.
Yes, it's so true. People ask me questions and I'm like trying to like really geek out on your horse's hoof and why he's growing this way and what I can do in the trim and how can I make it better, and did it get better last time? Do I have to do
right?
I have an unbelievable amount of things going through my head when I'm working on your horse. And so when you ask me a detailed question that requires a serious thought process, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to wait a minute.
Right.
So my little tips that I've put together, and I've kind of talked with a few different people and kind of gotten their ideas on the important things about communication is, I don't know if they're in any order of importance. They're all important, but I think first and foremost is you have to listen. You can't just hear what the person is saying and think you know the answer. Listen to the entire piece, and then you can respond. I think that is huge. I catch myself not doing that. I hear people and then I'm already like on to the next, I'm on to the end of that answer. And it's like, whoa, back up, listen, getting it better. Because sometimes it's different. So listen, that's really important. Don't just hear them. It's not personal. When you're having a communication and you're trying to convey something that potentially is really emotional, know that things aren't personal, and not to take things so personally. When I tell you your horse's feet are having an issue, I'm not attacking you. It's not your fault. I'm not saying your horse is a bad horse or he's not a good specimen. I'm just saying he has an issue and there are things we need to do differently. So it's not personal, and try not to take it that way. So that's I think really important to me, and we're horse people. We're crazy horse people, and we love our babies. And don't tell me my horse can't go Grand Prix. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not personal.
Right.
I think questions are great. If we don't understand something, if we don't understand somebody else's viewpoint, ask more questions. And again, for the receiving side, don't take it personally. If I'm asking you why you do something, it's not because I think you're stupid or because I think it's a bad answer. I want to know more about your thought process or what you think. Just explain it to me. So I think using questions to facilitate conversation is really important. And I also find that they keep things from getting heated sometimes. So instead of saying to your farrier, can you take more toe off, or take more toe off, or he's tripping, fix that. Ask the question, why might he be tripping? Is there something we can do to help it? Do you think this is beneficial? Start asking those kinds of questions, because when you allow people to have an answer, and again, not taking it personally, it can really open up the doors to have great conversations. Knowing your audience. I'm not going to talk to a 5-year-old the way I'm going to talk to a vet student. I am going to use vocabulary that person can understand. I don't want them to feel stupid for not understanding something, but I want them to feel like the information is accessible. So I don't personally need to dumb things down, but I need to make it accessible for the people that I'm talking to. So I think that that's really important, is knowing who you're talking to. I have nothing to prove by using big words that nobody understands, and I leave them with their mouths gaping open and they're saying, wow, that sounded important, but I didn't understand it.
Right.
So that's really important to me, is knowing my audience, and being authentic with what we're saying, and saying what I mean and meaning what I say. I don't beat around the bush with people. I really strive. It's something that's difficult for a lot of us. We get heated, we get emotional, we take things personal, and then we say things that aren't a real reflection of how we truly feel. And so I feel like being congruent with people. So, talking to your farrier and having that hard conversation, we can take it personally because we do care so much. But if you talk to me in terms of, hey, I really love my horse and I'm really concerned about how this is going, do you think that we can have a discussion about how this could be different, is very different than you calling me and crying and yelling at me and saying I'm a bad farrier, because that's different. Mm-hmm. So I think being really congruent with the way that we communicate is really important. And it really gives, for me, it really gives us, and this is like all of life, I think it really gives us a chance to be open and honest with ourselves and the world around us, and know that I'm not responsible for somebody else's actions or reactions. Period. When I am authentic and congruent, it's on you. If you're upset with me, it's not because I did something inauthentic or I said something that wasn't really how I felt or heart-centered. It gives them a chance to do what they need to do, and then I can let go of it if they're not okay with what I had to say, because at least I was honest with myself and the information that I provided.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they weren't okay, they could certainly continue the conversation.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. And when you're being authentic, then it's not a challenge to continue those conversations.
No, they tend to go a lot easier, for sure. It's like the client that needs to fire me. Well, just tell me the problem. And I know it's really hard, and I know that being honest is painful. I know that it is, but it oftentimes is absolutely the best answer. And I would rather you not make up a reason why you want to fire me. Just call it how it is. I'm not going to take it personal. If I'm not the right farrier for you, that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's totally okay.
Right.
So those are my 5 tips.
Those are 5 tips. I counted 6. I was writing them down. Were you calling your timing one of your tips?
No, but I should add it.
Yeah, totally add that. Totally add that. So as a review for anybody, I know our numbers just kind of jumped up on here for folks checking in. Do you mind if I give a recap and you can tell me if I got them right or wrong?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Okay, so I've got as your 6 tips for conversations with any professional. First tip be aware of your timing. Second being listen before responding. Third, it isn't personal. 4, ask more questions. 5, know your audience. And 6, be authentic and or congruent.
That's about it.
Perfect. Good. Yeah, that's totally 6 tips there. So.
I was like, well, timing really just it's for me, but no, it really doesn't. My mom really doesn't want me to ask her questions when she's, trying to do something important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Her daughter, but.
Right. No, I agree. The timing is very important there. And there's sometimes when there is no perfect timing, the timing is just the now, right? depending on what it is. So like you said, with having conversations like they feel as though the fit isn't right and they need to choose a different professional, the timing for that would never feel perfect, right? But it would always be perfect in that timing to just be, and that goes to your tip number 6, just being authentic about it.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, picking up the phone and telling somebody it's not working, it's hard, because we all want to be accepted and we all want it to work all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's human nature.
Mm-hmm.
But there is nothing worse than continuing on a relationship, whether it's work or personal, that's not suiting either party. And if one person is trying to make it work and it's not, I guarantee you the other person feels it too. And so having that conversation, as hard as it is, it's just a weight off your shoulders, man. You get stronger when you do it. It's hard, but you definitely get stronger, and then you get more clear about it. Because I'm a really good. I pay attention and I use my inner barometer. Wow, did I feel really yucky saying that? Oh, okay. I should have maybe been more authentic. Okay, food for thought. Next time, not do that.
Mm-hmm.
So timing,
well, and
the right timing, but you feel better afterwards.
Yeah. And as much as it might seem like a cop-out, I mean, we've got the technology now that you can simply send a text message, and if that's all you feel you have the brass to do, at least that's better than nothing else, Yeah,
I'm going to agree and disagree. I know that communication is hard for a lot of people, and doing things that might feel yucky, like firing somebody, or calling to say, hey, we have a problem and we really take a look at this. It's really hard, but I tell you what, there is nothing worse than saying, we found somebody else, we don't need you next week or tomorrow or the day after.
Yeah.
Message.
Yeah.
I am a human being and I am a professional, and if you need to call and fire me, you need to fire me. I totally respect your decision. But I don't know, I would appreciate an explanation, an honest explanation, but that's me. That's not everybody else.
Right, absolutely. I've heard in the past of farriers that were presumably fired just simply because the owners never called, never got in any contact again after a certain point, and I've always felt, well, a bad goodbye letter would still be better than just no communication whatsoever,
Absolutely. It's my preference to get a phone call.
Yes.
At least communicate with me. This non-communication thing just leaves everybody feeling yucky.
Absolutely. Especially when we're living in the age of such accessible communication, and that goes down to basically everything we've talked about today, right? As far as it's never before been easier to communicate than it is now, so there's no excuse for at least a poor attempt at communication to some extent.
Absolutely better than nothing.
Right. All right, fantastic. So those are Kendra's 6 tips for conversations with your farrier and with any professional. And gosh, those tips go on for conversations with anyone at all, professional or non-professional. So I love that. I think that's great.
Yep.
I think that's great.
I thought so.
Good deal. All right. So I know you had some topics specifically that you wanted to cover, and I feel like we've done a really great job here. Is there anything we might have missed so far?
I think this is kind of a fun one. People obviously see, you see obvious lameness, I guess is a better way to say it. People see obvious lameness, but I feel like there are potential hoof problems and the resulting lameness that just they fly under the radar, and people don't realize that there could be a potential hoof issue. And I think that becoming a little bit more savvy to some of the things that are happening in our horses' lives, what we see in movement, what we see physically, or behavior that we're noticing, you might want to take stock of what's going on with the feet. It isn't always a hoof-related issue, but definitely something that we should rule in or out as an issue.
Okay.
So I've lumped them kind of into three categories. Things we see during movement, the physical things that we see with the horse and behavior. So starting with, I guess, with behavior, any negative behavior, biting, bucking, rearing, tail swishing, for sure, tail swishing, scrunching up of the face. I don't know, that's totally behavior, but like it is a controlled movement that they're doing to express a certain opinion, how they feel about things. Refusal to pick up limbs, or limbs that don't feel right in the way that they pick up, or they're just difficult for the farrier. Definitely can have problems stemming from a foot issue that I think that it's important to think about. It's not always the case, but certainly something to think about. The physical signs of things, I feel like we could probably gloss over. The biggest one for me is movement. There are so many things that happen that we just aren't aware of that could be hoof related. Horses that are having difficulty with their leads, whether they're having difficulty picking up a certain lead, or they keep swapping leads behind or up front, or they land over a jump on a certain lead all the time. Definitely can have roots with a hoof related issue. Horses that land excessively heel first or toe first is another one. I feel like the barefoot movement really talked about having horses having a heel first landing to be a healthy thing. And it's certainly more desirable than a toe first landing. But a heel first landing is not indicative of a healthy foot in and of itself. For example, laminitic horses will often land very hard heel first. So that's not a sign of a healthy foot whatsoever. So keeping in mind that excessive, heel landing or toe first landing, at least it's worth looking at. There might be a very reasonable explanation because of his conformation or his posture or something that he has going on, but it's at least worth investigating to see, is there something we could be doing different here? Difficulty with transitions, I mentioned it earlier. If we're having trot to canter, canter to trot, or issues, within certain things, piaffe to passage, or just within a piaffe or a passage, I think that, definitely there could be a foot related issue that could be worth looking at. Tripping absolutely can be a foot related issue, but not always. And a lot of times it's not always. There are a lot of things that go into horses tripping. Lameness, short-stridedness, that tender, like they're on hot walks, difficulty going from soft ground to hard ground. People, a lot of times will say, oh, he's just, accommodating, and sometimes he is, but that should only be a stride. If it's beyond a stride, it's an issue. Knuckling over can definitely be a sign of a hoof-related issue. There's a lot of other factors that are involved with horses that knuckle over, but I've certainly seen feet being maintained a certain way contributing to the knuckling over getting worse or beginning. So I think those things are just kind of important for people to be aware of, that there are things that are happening for these horses while they're moving that could be indicators that there is a hoof-related issue we need to look at.
Gotcha. So, I'm sorry.
I had a horse that I knew about. I wasn't shoeing him, but I was there when they found out about it. He came in from his work and like, he just feels funny. Like he's just having trouble with his lateral work to the left. But he's okay everywhere else. But just lateral work to the left. Well, turns out, once we took the shoe off, the horse, just in one cycle alone, had developed a rampant white line infection in his lateral toe quarter.
No kidding.
Right. So that lack of structural integrity there really bugged that horse. He was an upper level dressage horse, really bugged him, and enough that it made his lateral work to the left very difficult. So, definitely worth having a look at. And that was a case where the rider was awesome, and instead of just chalking up to him having a bad day or whatever, at least mentioned it. Hey, this might be nothing, but this is what we're feeling. This horse is normally super solid, and this is an issue today. Can we have a look? And you find a pretty good sized pocket. You're like, oh, wow, that's.
Yeah, that answers that, huh?
Right, for sure.
Wow. So you mentioned the idea about a horse striding and landing excessively heel first or excessively toe first. Is there an ideal that you would talk about with the foot landing? So for somebody out there generally just watching their horse go, is there an ideal for how the heel and the toe should be landing on the ground?
It's a little bit different. It depends.
Definitely, maybe.
Right. So it depends on your horse and its conformation, and a little bit, their age and what they've been doing and any issues they have going on. But in general, I'd like to see most horses landing slightly heel first, if not flat. But I certainly have horses that slap their foot to the ground super hard flat, and that's not super ideal, but those horses also have other physical issues going on that cause them to do that. But in general, flat, a little bit heel first.
Okay, good. So for anybody out there who's listening who wants to go take a peek at your horse while he's moving, that's something to be aware of. And I would imagine that would be something that we'd want to always be aware of so that you would know your horse's natural way of going also, yeah? So that if that changes, then you know that that's a conversation that we need to have.
Yep, absolutely. And just to add on to that, you don't want a horse landing, too hard on the medial side or the lateral side of the foot. However, there are conformation things, there are postural things, there are arthritis and injuries that cause them to land a little more medial or a little more lateral. And we just do the best that we can to manage that and keep it from, getting worse or causing other issues to the best of our ability.
Perfect. Okay, so we've got a question that came in from Jonathan on the Facebook Live broadcast here. And Jonathan asks about the potential to cause laminitis with changes from shod to barefoot. Have you got any experience with that? Do you know anything about that?
Certainly. So we can certainly have horses that get quite sore coming out of shoes and staying barefoot. I feel like to get a full-blown case of laminitis, I feel like there's other factors that are involved that weren't taken into account, such as, did we do a little bit or a lot too much of a trim after we pulled the shoes off? Certainly getting those horses too short and having them go on hard ground can make them very uncomfortable. And I feel like laminitis can be a little bit of a broad term. Is the foot inflamed? Yeah, absolutely with laminitis. Are we having solar pain from the hard ground, or are we having laminate pain? And I don't know that we necessarily, or inflammation, I guess it's inflammation, can differentiate in the field between a horse that is laminitic or just footsore because of hard ground. And the biggest thing for me would be that as soon as we protect those horses, they immediately improve.
Gotcha.
So certainly horses can get laminitic from hard ground, but I feel like those feet are also already compromised or over trimmed or both while taking barefoot, or to add to that, they got worked hard on hard ground without their feet being protected. That could certainly lead to a situation where they could become laminitic for sure.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So they were a horse that had the propensity for it, and the conditions were just right that they got tipped over the edge.
Right, whether it was just turnout in the environment or they got worked harder than they were ready to. So it's not that I want horses to have time off when they have their shoes pulled, but I think we really need to be mindful of each individual and what their tolerance level is. And if you work your horse and the next day he says, yeah, that was too much, well, then we need to give him some time. But ideally, we wouldn't have worked him that hard to begin with. We would just give him some time, a few days. Give him a few days. We'll know the most within the first, I don't know, to me, 48 hours on whether or not we're going to have an issue.
Mm-hmm.
If he's good in those first 48 hours, I think that we can, start to introduce our work and work up to normal within a very short period of time. If we are finding in the first 48 hours that the horse is really sore, then we need to take a little bit more care. And we talked in the beginning of this chat about what some of those things would be. But hopefully we've taken all our steps and assured these horses are going to stay comfortable. At least I typically do with my clients. I don't have too many horses that come out of shoes and are crippled. We've done our homework, and the feet are good. And if they're not good, then we don't pull them out of shoes until they are good.
Well, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And in the end, we are our horses, life coach and fitness coach, right? So we have to make sure, it's like you talked about the overworking of the horse in one day. As our horse's fitness coach, we need to make sure that we don't do that. We need to make sure he's prepared for the work that he's doing. And anytime there would be changes like this, we need to take that into account for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right, fantastic. So, you ready for our wrap-up questions?
Oh my! I'm stressing about this.
You're not prepared. I love it. So if there was one specific thing that you could recommend for the owners out there to focus on as a primary means of helping their horses' feet, what would that be?
Primary means of helping their horses' feet. Get to know your horse.
Awesome.
And get to know what's normal for him. Again, that's why I don't like blogs and horse forums, because your horse is not their horse. Get to know your horse. Feel his feet every day. What do they feel like? What is the texture? How do they look? Are they hot? Are they cold? Does it fluctuate? What are his digital pulses? Get to know that, because if there's ever an issue, you're going to want to know what's normal for your horse. Have a look at the bottom of his feet. What does the sole look like? Does it feel hard? Does it feel squishy in spots? Does it have a weird shape? Does it have bulges? What does your frog look like? Get to know your horse. Picking the feet out isn't just to remove debris. It's just good hygiene. When you wash your face, you make sure you get the nooks and crannies and you take care of anything you need to take care of. It's the same thing with your horse. It's not just picking out his feet. You need to look at his feet, assess his feet. I have clients that don't pick their feet out, and then the horse is lame, and I get there and there's a nail in the foot. It's like, did you pick his feet out?
Man.
No, I didn't. Well, that should have been number one when your horse came in sore, was to pick up his foot and pick it out. So get to know your horse's feet. Get to know, the shape of them, the look of them, and all the nuances, so that when it changes, because they do, the environment changes, maybe your boarding or living situation changes, maybe your feed changes, who knows? There's so many things. But get to know them so that when things do change, you at least know what his baseline looked like. Oh, he didn't have that bulge there before. Oh, what? That's good information and something to share with your farrier and or vet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You won't notice the changes if you don't know the normal.
Right. I always tell clients that are leaving my practice, that are moving away. I've got one that's going to Texas here in a few weeks, and she's concerned about finding a farrier that's going to fit her needs and what she's looking for her animals. And I told her to take pictures now. We know where they're at now.
Mm-hmm.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, we know where they're at right now, and we know that right now they are sound and happy and healthy. So take photos of all angles. And take photos that you can easily repeat. Don't take them at odd angles. Put your phone on the ground so that next time you can take it on the ground. Do something as repeatable as possible, because it's helpful to have similar images to compare. If you have off-angle pictures to try to compare, it's impossible to get a good representation. So I invite people to take photos.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, photos and x-rays. You know, I know they're expensive, and I know that not everybody wants to do them, but they are helpful in determining a baseline. Mm-hmm. So definitely, those are my big things.
Perfect. Okay, if you could ride with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
So I've been preparing for days because I knew you were going to ask me.
Oh, you knew this one, huh?
That question, and I still don't have an answer because I didn't have one last time. So I don't have a person, but I would love to ride with somebody like true Western horsemen, like the old time vaqueros that really, really understood how to bring a horse along that way. And I would love to do something like that. I've always thought it was fascinating, and to be able to understand those working horses that have a job and how they've been developed, I think is fascinating. And not just, to go do cow work or a specific discipline, but in general, like what do they do and how do they do it, and learning the nuances and the art of that tradition, I think would be super fun. But I don't know who that is, and that's okay.
There you go. Well, no, that's great. That is great. And there were so many great ones out there. So
right. And a lot of them have left us.
Yes.
There are not many out there, but I think it's fascinating, and I would love to learn more about it.
That's awesome. What is your present personal definition of horsemanship?
I'm going to go with this because I just said it to my husband the other day with his horse. It's working with who you are that day and the horse that you have in that situation. And I think a horseman is someone who honors where they're at and where the horse is, and finds that middle ground to work within the limits of both the horse and human to the best of their ability. And so one day it might just be all we do is walk, and the next day we can do canter pirouettes. Whatever it is, just wherever you're at, where your horse is, find a happy ground where both can feel good and happy and present with the situation.
That's perfect. Work from where you are.
Yep.
I love it. What book do you have on your current reading list?
Horse-wise?
It doesn't matter.
Oh.
That's a new question. I didn't ask you this question last time. I just added this one.
You did. You totally did it on purpose. I actually just finished a book, and it was just a fun, easy read. And so I'm between books. So I don't currently have a book that is on my reading list that's for fun or for learning, either way.
What was the recent one?
The recent one was Artemis. Andy Weir, he wrote The Martian, that was a movie.
Oh, yeah.
That guy, Matt Damon. He wrote Artemis, and it just was a super fun sci-fi, sassy male or female lead, and it was fun. I just liked it.
Nice. Good. Okay, how can folks find you if they want to get in touch with you?
On my Facebook page, personal or business is probably the best way to get a hold of me at this point.
Perfect, and I will make sure that gets tagged in the notes section on this broadcast also. All right, and this one, I know the one you've been waiting for, the one everybody dreads, is the question of the day. Every time we do one of these broadcasts, the guest gets to ask the question of the day for everybody out there in the audience to answer in the comment section of this broadcast. So what do you have for us as the question of the day?
See, and I wasn't prepared for this one. I totally forgot. I was stewing over the other one and forgot about this one. So my question of the day is... How well do you know your horse's feet? And it's not oh yeah, I know them really well, I know what they look like. It's, can you tell me in general terms about his angles, about his sole, is it flat, is it cuppy, about his collateral grooves, which go down the sides of the frog. Are they deep? Are they shallow? Is one deeper than the other one? How about his frog width and the health of his digital cushion? Like, detailed. How well do you know his feet, all of them? And are they different? And do you know why?
I love that question, gang. Give us your answers in the comments section below, and I'm going to be checking in, and I'm sure Kendra will be checking in also to see what you've got for us as answers for that question. Kendra, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was super fun.
This is always fun. This is always fun, and I look forward to the next time we do this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. All right, gang, I want to thank you for giving Kendra and I your ear. Please remember that if you've missed any of it, you can access this broadcast in full through Facebook, YouTube, or iTunes. Through whatever platform you're listening, please be sure to give us a rating, a comment, a review, and a share. Your word of mouth is the fuel for this fire. Speaking of which, 2017 is coming to a close. Who would you like to hear join me for a broadcast here on Talking About Horses? Leave me a comment or send me a message about who you'd like to hear join me in 2018. Be sure to tune in next Thursday, December 21st, for my chat with gaited horse clinician Liz Graves.